Coming up in this video, psychic kids and child mediums. This is part of our mediumship development training. So we want to know, do you have a kid medium, a conscious child, or a gifted child?
And were you a psychic child? Did you have mediumship as a child?
And if you have any questions as we go relating to the topic of this video, drop them in the comments.
And while that is going to be entertaining with some free juicy information,
we do have an offer at the end to take your metaphysical business from basic to bodacious.
If you're watching live, give us a hashtag live tribe.
And if you're watching on the replay, hashtag replay fam.
I just feel like I need to be doing something a little bit more spectacular when he
UFC.
does that. If you're just getting to know us, I'm Heather.
And I'm David.
From ZenRoseGarden.com. And since 2008, we've helped thousands of clients go from being confused, insecure, and overwhelmed to being clear, confident, and successful. If you are a healing arts professional
or you want to be,
let us know by putting a hashtag HealingPro in the comments.
And let us know what you do or what you want to do.
Let's get talking about it. Chandra says, I was a child medium without guidance or proper training. It sucked. Now, if I meet a gifted child, I'm all about a supportive environment. Perfect. Okay, this is going to have some great information for you today.
Yeah, it's going to fit perfectly with everything we got going on.
So through the years in our work, we've had the opportunity to help several child mediums over our 11, 12 years together. And usually a parent who is already a client will bring their child in to help them understand their gifts.
Or if the parent was a person who had their gifts closed down, and Chandra, that's perfect, by a fearful parent as a kid, and they don't want to do that to the kid, okay? They don't want to do the same thing that they had experienced to their own child.
But also they didn't exactly know what to do or how to help, even though they knew the child could use some direction. So those are kind of the scenarios that we've come across in helping child mediums.
And that just sets up the awesomeness that we have for you guys today. So today, we want to give you a few tips on child mediums because there is a right way to work with them and a wrong way. Actually, a couple of wrong ways.
So some of them with good intention, but with not so great results.
Right.
So because children are different than adults, obviously.
Right.
So basically, this video is about how to not screw up your child medium and how to heal your own past trauma of being a child that is sensitive to the spirit world, because we take those traumas with us.
And then we have to unwind them later. So now it's time. Now it's time for the good stuff. Now it's time for the good stuff.
For those of you that are new to the channel, that's
our transition music.
Our transition music.
That we don't have to pay for.
Yeah, we don't have to pay royalties and stuff. Yes. So tip number one is be natural about it. So I'm going to give you a quote from a classic mediumship.
Be granola.
What?
Natural granola. Forget it. Don't shave your armpits. No? Okay. Anyway, continue.
So here's a quote from the Wallace Guide to Mediumship Unfoldment, written in 1910. Wallace says, when mediumship is spontaneous in children, it should not be repressed. Good. Neither should it be excessively exercised, okay? Like, in other words, not as an adult would. Right. Nor should child mediums be made much of and their mediumship extolled in their hearing, like, you are the great and powerful child, right? The fact of their possession of their psychic power of seeing or hearing or any other gift should be regarded as natural and accepted in a calm, common sense manner.
Right.
And I love this quote, and this is from 1910 when this guide to mediumship was written by one of my favorite authors.
So there's a little note here on children's sensitives in general, right? Filters are not yet developed, okay? You're a kid, your brain is still developing, so you haven't developed really an off switch or an on-off switch or any kind of boundary system.
So sometimes a child doesn't even realize that what they're sensing is anything different at all.
Right.
So for me, I did kind of realize that as a child medium, the spirit thing was a little bit not the normal because people talked about it more. But I could see auras from the time I was little, never thought it was weird, thought everybody could see it, and didn't even mention it to my dad, who could also see them, but kept it on the DL because that was the generation where you don't talk about it. So I was actually kind of into my teenage years when I said, hey, look at that. And my dad was like, oh, let's have a conversation. But so I never had any emotional stuff attached to that. But the spirit stuff was different. So
when working with a child medium, depending on the age, After puberty, I would say it's getting about time when a child medium can start sitting and really developing if they want to. And that is very important to recognize, because a child automatically is they're wired to people please in the beginning. Okay? So you don't want them just to do it because you want them to do it, because they're looking for acceptance.
So you got to let the kids' gift unfold and what their desire is towards their
Right.
gift, because all children are sensitive to the spirit world. They just are. They just might not be talking about it all the time. So
Right.
before that, child mediums need time to be kids.
To just be normal
But
kids.
yet you don't want to totally not acknowledge their gift.
Right.
So there's a balance as a parent to
strike that balance
strike.
of normalcy and acknowledgement without fear or super exaggeration.
So what a
Okay?
parent doesn't want to do
Yeah.
is to turn their very impressionable child into a magic 8-ball, right? Some basic things do need to be taught to the child, especially if their gift is coming up and it's shocking for them, so that the child is not in fear of their gift, and they
can naturally be with it, hang out with it.
Right.
But this isn't the time to go hardcore training and turn them into Rocky the Medium until their brain has a little bit more time to develop.
So it's sort of, as a parent, especially because you're excited,
Right.
because you want to open your kid's gift and not shut it down like maybe yours were.
Yeah.
It's about creating a healthy, natural balance in an environment for, like Chandra the Strange says, a supportive environment, Chandra,
Yes.
because it's like chakra.
No, it's like Jackie
It's
Chan.
like Jackie. Okay, got it. I remember.
Chan.
I remember.
That's how I remember.
So that they have a natural, supportive environment where it isn't like overly, it's a weird thing, then you're super, super special, and it isn't also met with like, it's nothing. So it's got to be this natural
this
place.
happy balance in between. So a great way to look at this, as far as the over-exaggeration element, has anybody ever seen a pageant parent that absolutely over-dramatizes their child and ends up over-traumatizing their child by putting them in pageants when they're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, before they've actually developed?
So like the beauty pageant
Yes.
queen mom that dresses up
yeah.
the 3-year-old like an adult, and the pageant thing, or the stage mother, same kind of thing. Don't be a
Don't be a stage mom. Don't be a pageant mom.
a child medium pageant mom.
Yes, don't do that.
So Wallace goes on to say in his book, one unwise way of dealing with a child medium is to tell him he is a wonder and praise him to other people before his face. Another is to urge him to sit, which is the practice of unfolding, against his inclinations, and by bribes and threats, compel him to exercise his powers until he is exhausted. So in other words, don't be
Pageant mom.
Don't be a pageant mom to your psychic
Or
child.
dad.
So in other words, let a kid be natural about it.
Let a kid be a kid.
Let a kid be a kid, but also encourage the gifts in a very natural way, but don't turn them into a magical weirdo
For your ego,
so you can show them off at your party.
don't do that. Poor kid won't know how to social very well when they get older.
Right, so that's kind of the healthy balance to strike. And we've seen parents do it
On both extremes.
We've seen the pageant psychic parents, and it's the kid is just sort of like, what am I
just wanna
supposed to
be a
do?
kid.
Or the kids stepping into it so much that they're not really having a grip on
who they are even.
on the kid reality of being a kid. Let's go on to tip number 2. Okay, the fear center.
Yes.
I want to talk about the fear center because I think
It's scary.
we talk about indigo children and conscious children and star children and all of these labels we have for our magical children, but we need to talk about the part of brain at that time that is functioning more than the adult part of brain that you're seeing their gift with.
Yeah, you haven't gotten to logical reasoning and rationalization yet. So we are born this ball of id, this human primal thing, this animalistic thing that feels, emotes, and wants, and that's pretty much all it is right there.
And this is because we start off life as an infant, as a little undeveloped brain child, operating
brain child, I like that.
operating from a primal part of our brain.
It's very, very feely.
And the parts of our brain that are able to process things in our world that are more subjective and understand the bigger picture and the spiritual meaning of things are not developed yet in the child's brain. So you as a parent sort of have a responsibility to fill that in for your kid. Understand that they're right there with the feeling, they're right there with the emotion, they're right there with the sensation.
Yes.
And
Incubate them where they're at.
right, but you don't want to like there's a way to deal with it.
Yeah.
So
a child medium before puberty is still growing a brain, still growing some of those evolved parts of the brain. So as a child, we respond emotionally, and what we sense feels very overly intense and very tangible, very real at that point in our life.
So we're operating with a part of our brain that we stimulate when we're doing psychic work, spiritual work, and when we're getting in touch as adults with the spirit world. We feel it. It's tangible. It's real. But we get there as adults by when we meditate or we have a spiritual experience. We get in touch with that tangible feeling that's connected to the primal part of our brain that lets us know that it's real. It feels real and tangible. And a child lives there.
Yeah, and that's the thing, though. At that part of the brain's development, it is still very close and very associated with that fight or flight reaction. Okay, so the higher brain functions and the things that we do as we get older and we start going back and developing and sitting, that gets more into the contemplation where you get to see the big picture. That part of the brain hasn't yet developed yet in a child.
So let me kind of clarify this. A child is thinking and responding so much from that feeling center and really hasn't developed the ability that an adult does to toggle into rational contemplation, those sorts of things, and then toggle back into that feeling that you get when you maybe step into that spiritual space.
Right.
So a child is just in that space.
They live there.
Which lives right next to the fear center. So
the first go-to is going to be the feel center, the emotions, the feelings, which sits right next to that fear center.
So as a child, we respond emotionally, and what we sense feels overly intense and very tangible. The problem is the more sophisticated parts of the brain that can process rationally are undeveloped. So the first go-to is going to be the feel center, emotions and feelings, which sits right near the fear center. So
if a parent is responding with fear and negativity, what they're doing is they're going to imprint that fear of the spirit world and anything mystical in that young, undeveloped brain of the child as kind of a permanent response that needs to be deprogrammed later in life if the person is going to ever be able to connect with the spirit world with any sense of confidence and clarity and dissociate from the fear of it.
So if the parent is responding with fear to the child's psychic abilities, sensitivities, if the parent responds with fear, they're right there in the child's emotional center. They're going to trigger the child's fear. So now the child hasn't developed that rational contemplative part of their brain, so they
it's
can't.
A trigger right there.
Right, so they can't sit back very easily and go, "Yeah, you're full of shit."
Right.
It's not very easy for a child to do that.
And if you're afraid and you put that fear on them, they're like, "Oh, I must need to be afraid."
So the parent's programming a fear response to anything mystical at that age.
Right.
Once a kid, the reason I say puberty is you've got certain connections that develop after, in that time between you're 8 and 12 years old, that this is why teenagers are assholes, right? Because they're like, no, you're full of shit.
Yeah.
So they develop part of their brain and it's questions what the parent is telling them.
It can basically, at that point, accept or reject what's coming in based on what they already know.
So W.J. Colville, who's another spiritualist, mediumship teacher from the early 1900s, warned parents of child mediums. I love some of these old Victorian era quotes. Or post-Victorian era quotes. He said, there are 3 vile ways, I love the word vile, 3 vile ways of treating a mediumistic child. To call him a liar and threaten him with awful punishment if he ever dares to talk about such rot as spiritual insight. That's number 1. Or attribute his vision to illness and dose him with nauseating medicines. Or number 3, my favorite, tell him he is possessed with the devil and get some ignorant fanatic to pray over him. So those are the 3 warnings given by...
Can we just pause on that one for a moment? You're possessed. Okay, you're a little kid. You're like 3, right? You are possessed with the devil and we must get it out.
So ignorant fanatic to pray over him. So this is, again, something from a classic mediumship training manual from the late 1800s, early 1900s. So
please heed the advice. treat your kid normal. That's all you got. That's all you got. Yeah, trauma, Chandra, that's perfect.
So how are we doing so far? Clearing up some mysteries. Is this making sense? The fun thing has been for us when a parent brings their child in for help and training as an adult, and the parent starts to open their gifts as well, and the parent and child learn together. And that's kind of a fun thing that we've done in the past with clients.
Because it also gives the parent of the child permission to open up like a child.
And that's what we're going to talk about in the next tip about what do you do as an adult.
Right. So it's pole time.
So we want
No, I'm not going to pole dance.
I can't with him. So we want to know from you, did you ever experience this kind of spontaneous mediumship we're talking about as a child? I know that I did.
Yep.
So
let us know in the comments.
We want to know if you did.
Yep.
So
are we the only ones? Are we really that strange?
Well,
Paula says, I have not. All right.
Some do, some don't.
And let me kind of give a little personal example before going any further here. And I just want to explore like a psychic element. So when I was a kid, I used to know things. It would just come in and I would say things without necessarily knowing what they meant, but that somebody needed to hear them. Okay? So from that element, I was coaching my mom and basically being a life coach to her when I was a little kid, and I didn't know that there was anything different about it, okay? So that would be another example of, and in this case, it was mediumship because it was coming from spirit to her. So I was basically channeling whatever it was, and I knew that it was a good thing, but that would be another example of mediumship abilities that you may not necessarily conceive as being mediumship.
Right, and I know when my kids were little, kids will just drop wisdom that is beyond their years sometimes, and
they say the darndest things.
Right, so and a lot of times they're tapping into something that's just natural and flowing. It may not be, the mediumship for them may not show up as I see a spirit or I sense an energy. It just might be this natural kind of download, and your kid says something that is not in their skill set on this earth. It's just sort of something very inspired. That's also mediumship.
Yes. Let's move on to tip number 3.
Opening back up as an adult.
Right.
So as you can kind of tell from tip number 2, what happens in the brain as a child from a fearful parent can really affect how you sense the spirit world as an adult. So for me, once I hit 12 years old, that age I was talking about, I hit the library and began studying hard as much as I could find out about my gift from sources that were educational. And so luckily I had parents that didn't shut it down and had enough sense to give me some basic tools to feel safe with the heavier things I was sensing and seeing. Right. And later I had to get my own education beyond what they could teach me. Right. But for many people, they're not so lucky. Right?
And then when they end up hitting adulthood, something triggers their natural gifts, and they really, really do want to open their gifts again without fear. But that fear impulse is re-triggered, especially if they have trauma that got implanted years before by those overly fearful and superstitious parents or adults around them. It doesn't even have to necessarily be parents.
Right, because remember, when the kid is young, you're programming the brain. It's very malleable.
And impressionable.
So that fear response that from the parent is like triggering your fear response. It's setting up a program for life that you've got to go in and unprogram. So the first step to reopening is calming down that inner child that was made to feel fear around their gifts. Right. So if you were shut down by fearful parents as a child, your already overstimulated child primal fear centers at the time were more overstimulated by their freak out, and that created this fight or flight response that in turn now produces neurochemicals. This is what's happening in the brain that interfere with the rational frontal lobe function when you think about the spirit world. So stimulation happens with one part of the brain, right? It's that visceral primal first response.
The feeling, right.
But then you think about it rationally and contemplatively with the frontal lobe and the other parts of the brain, but that has been interrupted with all these neurochemicals of fight or flight that interrupt that part of the brain.
Right. So as a child, those rational parts of the brain, those contemplative parts of the brain were not strong enough yet or even developed necessarily to recognize that your parents may have been acting out of some kind of superstitious fear And so you bought into it. You didn't know any different, and you just bought in.
Okay, so here's 3 ways that you can respond out of your child self.
Your primal responses that are very active as a child are, just like animals, fight, flight, or play dead.
So depending on how you responded as a child to the way that your parents responded to you in that primal response to whatever the energy was, are going to take place and continue taking place as an adult until you change them. So the first one is the fight response.
Right.
You may now see the spirit world as the enemy, as something scary, as there's demons and evil things going to eat your head.
So that every time that your brain goes to that place where you talk about mediumship or spirits or anything like that, you're ready to fight.
So you think it's spiritual warfare. There's this. It's this scary thing. So that's the first.
Yeah. And
way.
let us know if you've ever met anybody out in the world or seen anybody out in the world that operates from that fight response when it comes to anything related to mediumship or spirits or anything metaphysical even.
And you kind of still see people operating in this spiritual niche without operating, and it's kind of disconcerting.
Yeah.
The second
next one
is flight. So this could show up as an adult as I don't want anything to do with it. I want to run away from it. Oh, that's scary. I got to run. You're talking about the spirit world. You're running away from everything.
I can't hear it. I can't hear it.
Anything mystical, anything spiritual. You might actually develop a super hyper rational place
avoidance
where you live in that mostly frontal lobe rational, hyper rational part of your brain and sort of disconnect from the good parts of the feeling and the emotions and the contemplation that connect you and balance you with a healthy spiritual life. So that's the second way it might show up as an adult.
And an extreme example of that would be the hyper logical, I don't even believe in any of that. It doesn't exist. It literally does not exist because you're running away from it. Right.
So those are like 2 extremes, right? So
and let us know in the comments if you've ever met or seen anybody like that, whether it's in this niche or not. And then the third one.
The third one is the playing dead response, which means you completely shut off emotion, feeling, and create a numb response to it. You're just like, I see nothing. It's totally blank. You're just shutting down. You're putting a huge iron curtain between you and anything that feels mystic, feels stimulating. But what you're kind of doing there is also cutting off your connection to other feelings because they all sit. Emotions and feelings are all part of that limbic system of the brain.
So an example of this would be where somebody brings something like this up and you're just like, I just don't believe in that. I've never seen it. I've never witnessed it. I've never experienced it, even though they may have. They're playing dead. They're going into ignorance mode where they're just like, it does not exist. There's no possible way, which is a little different than the rational, than the hyper-rational, where they're explaining a way out of it. Okay, the play dead is just, no, I've never experienced that.
So the healthy place is to not, sometimes we don't realize that we've got fight or flight operating because it can show up as a numb response, a play dead response. So the healthy place to, and now I'm not even going to talk about being a medium or a psychic or stimulating the gifts, but
just emotions.
Just sitting in the space of a healthy spiritual life requires you to connect to that mystery in some way.
Right.
Depending on how deeply you connect to the mystery is depending on your personality.
Or just emotions. Because just emotions can be another example of that, where you've got somebody who their emotions weren't safe. So they've got that same association, fight, flight, or play dead, with their emotional responses. So they have to relearn how to emote again, how to feel again in a safe manner. It's the same thing when you're talking about opening up your skills again and opening up your gifts again.
So this is kind of why we tell you that your self-growth and your spiritual training have to go hand in hand, because so many people train them separately, and you can't, because they lie together in your brain in specific places where emotions and feelings and spiritual experiences live, and they're all living and emoting from parts of your brain that interact and act together all the time. So part of your work of training yourself as an adult is to parent your inner child medium or sensitive child out of the fears that are still subconsciously responding. They're just responding and you're not even aware of it, right?
Create the safe place for that child inside to develop. And then Chandra says, yep, my mom is a hardcore born-again Christian and damn near disowned me for being a medium. Medications and therapy and the whole 9 before teenage years.
See, I'm always confused about hardcore Christians and hardcore religious fanatics, because you cannot connect with the world of spirit, which means where Jesus lives, okay, for instance, without using mediumship.
Or God or angels or any of that.
Because the definition of mediumship is you're tuning into things of spirit in the spirit world and bringing them into the physical world in some way.
And I don't know about you, but I don't think Jesus is a living person in this time, here and now, that everybody knows. He doesn't have a Twitter, an Instagram, no Facebook.
So you get, if you're going to, let's go to the Christian route. If you're going to connect to Jesus, the telephone is mediumship. So that's just is what it is. So I think it's kind of silly how we do this us against them thing. But I do want to do a video about that at some point about how fundamentalist religion produces toxic neurochemicals in your brain.
That's going to be a good one.
It's a real thing. So
Marlene says, surrounded by uber religious people, the word channeling sends them into orbit. Yeah.
Okay.
And then Chandra says, pretty sure Jared Leto is Jesus. Okay. You might have something there.
Have we cleared up some mysteries or busted some myths? I'm pretty sure we have, because not many people are talking about the neurochemical reactions in your brain to mediumship.
It is a revolution. We are fighting back against lost fairies and unicorns running amok, and wreaking havoc.
We do love them both, but sometimes they drink too much love and light and puke rainbow frosting all over the carpet. So we do want to take a moment and give some love back every day to one of our Zen heads. Jay shared her experience with Zen Ed Academy with us on the Google machine recently, and she said, I am a new member of Zen Ed Academy. We love it, and wanted to let you know how much I love it. I have tried one or two other membership groups, and they don't offer nearly as much as you get as an official Zen head. I have only been a part of the group for a few weeks, but have already seen the benefits of your classes in my Reiki business. Thank you for providing the service for the spiritual community. Yes, that's what we love to hear.
Jay, you rock. And I'm very excited to see where you take not only your Reiki business, but yourself as a person and the rest of your business to whatever levels you're going to take it to. It's really exciting to see you and to see all of the people, all of our Zen heads, kind of stepping into themselves and evolving themselves as people, and then going out and doing more for the world. That makes it precious to us. That is one of the big reasons that we've done this.
The thing about Zen Ed Academy, we've created it so that every class that we teach is always available, so it's always growing. There's always courses that are being added, and you have access to all the previous classes. Is this right for you? Let's ask a few quick questions before we dip out. Are you tired of mediumship advice that is way too complicated?
Are you tired of our personal favorite, people telling you that the intuitive arts are satanic?
I know you guys are
alien,
on that one.
Are you ready for a psychic and mediumship training that does not scare the crap out of you? It actually does the opposite.
Makes you constipated?
No, it brings confidence.
Okay, because the opposite of doesn't scare the crap out of you might be make you constipated.
No.
Okay.
So Zen Ed Academy is the rebel base. Gotta love the rebel base, where the revolution begins.
Zen Ed Academy is our inner circle where we jack you into the ZRG mainframe so you can finally conquer your inner super villain, which might be your mom going, mediumship is evil.
Cover the dude, he says, hashtag Dave pays himself royalties. I do. I definitely do. And then Raylene says, Zen Ed Academy is awesome. Thank you, Raylene. You are absolutely amazing. We hashtag love our Zen heads. And all of the info is down below.
And if you liked this video, hit the like button. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. That is where we get ideas for new videos for you.
And for more mind hacking pro tips,
be sure to subscribe.
And clickety-click that bell to turn notifications on.
I swear to God, he's going to hit me in the nose one of these days with that.
I can do it today if you want.
So you're the first to know when we drop a new video or go live.
Oh, for that, she just jacked my line.
You were busy doing something.
All right, so we know that time is a valuable and precious resource. And the fact that you guys have chosen to spend that with us, we absolutely honor and appreciate that. But most importantly, that you guys are here to level up your minds, to get woke, stay woke, take your life and your business to a completely new level. We honor and appreciate that even more, like by 1,000, okay? Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
See you in the next video.